first video. This will be my first deck tech. This is your host, Johnny from Johnny the Combo Player, and I have a Xur the Enchanter deck for you guys today. This is my personal favorite deck, and it's a little bit of a different Xur deck. I don't think you guys have ever seen a Xur deck like this. It's a little bit of a meme. I've had this deck for maybe 3-4 years now, and I've put a lot of time and effort into it. So I wanted to take you guys through my personal Xur the Enchanter deck and show you guys what it's all about. So first, let's start with the commander. This is Xur the Enchanter. He is one generic and one of each Esper color pairing for a 1/4 flyer. When he attacks, you may search your library for an enchantment card with converted mana cost 3 or less and put that card onto the battlefield if you do shuffle your library. So he mostly is used for broken enchantments, so you can do pillow fort strategies and pretty much answer anything on the board, get your card draw. He's the toolbox commander, one of the ultimate toolbox commanders. This deck can run without Xur, but Xur obviously makes the deck a lot better, and sometimes he can just by himself propel the deck to its goal. So let's get to it. This is the goal of the deck, is to draw the game with Divine Intervention. So let me read this card to you. It's going to be 6 double white for an enchantment. It enters with 2 counters, and you remove a counter during your upkeep. When you remove the last counter from Divine Intervention, the game is over and considered a draw. So the whole goal of this deck has no way to win the game. The only way to end the game is in a draw. So to do that, we have a lot of things that we'll get into here. But first, let's get into the lands. Command Tower, obvious. Every deck plays Command Tower, they can play it. Serra's Sanctum, we're going to have a lot of enchantments in this deck. This land will tap for sometimes 5 mana, I'd say, is the average. Reliquary Tower, we're going to have a lot of cards in our hand, and this also combos with Necropotence very nicely. We'll get to Necropotence later. Cavern of Souls, this is mostly so Xur does not get countered, but every single creature except for 2 in my deck are humans, so you want to name human with this, and it protects almost all of the creatures in my deck, which some of them really do need protecting. Hall of Heliod's Generosity, this can get back crucial enchantments, and since it's on a land, this will be hard to get rid of. Prismatic Vista, just a fetch land for basic lands. It's nice to just have extra fixing. Urborg, just for more fixing. Typically, your opponents aren't going to take as much of advantage of this, so I just have it in here so my black mana is always fixed, and I don't necessarily have to correct fetch lands in case of library searching hate. And then this is the spiciest utility land I have in this deck. Taps for colorless, and I can pay 1 and tap it to move a counter from target permanent you control onto another target permanent. Activate this ability only time you can cast a sorcery. So you can only do it during your turn, but you can cast Divine Intervention and then immediately take one of the counters off and move it onto another permanent you control with this land. So that is very, very awesome that you have that ability on a land. Alright, and then we're getting into our normal lands here. So I got Underground Sea, Scrubland, and Tundra, all 3 of the dual lands. And then the fetch lands, Polluted Delta, Flooded Strand, and Marsh Flats. Not playing any of the off-color fetches. There's no need to, really. Then I have the 3 shock lands, Godless Shrine, Hollowed Fountain, and Watery Grave. Then I am also running the 3 filter lands, Sunken Ruins, Mystic Gate, and Fetid Heath. And I'm also playing the 3 Battle Bond lands, so Vault of Champions, Morphic Pool, and Sea of Clouds. And the 3 check lands, Isolated Chapel, Drowned Catacomb, and Glacial Fortress. And then to the basic lands, I am playing 4 islands, 3 plains, and 1 swamp. Now we'll get on to my artifacts for the deck. Obviously Mana Crypt. Mana Crypt is Mana Crypt. You just play it like Soul Ring. If you have the money for it, throw it in the deck. Chromox. Chromox will be important for 2 reasons, and this will be true for the other 0 mana ramp I have in this deck. Is for late game, it helps to ramp into the Ultra Mega turn where you Divine Intervention and take the counters off immediately for the draw, and also be able to hold up counter spell magic if need be, or to potentially have a turn 2 Zur. That's what these are for. So Lotus Petal achieves the same purpose. You tap and sacrifice it for mana. And Mox Diamond, you pitch a land and it taps for any color. And Soul Ring, because Soul Ring, every deck plays Soul Ring. Arcane Signet, it's great for turn 3 Zur, and it's just solid ramp. Then we have the 3 Signets: Azorius Signet, Orzhov Signet, and Dimir Signet, and the 3 Talismans: Talisman of Hierarchy, Talisman of Dominance, and Talisman of Progress. So those are all the artifacts that I run in this deck. I don't need any special artifacts that don't tap for mana. A lot of our power from our deck comes through enchantments, not artifacts, obviously, because we're playing Zur. So, on to creatures. I have Esper Sentinel here, kind of a newer edition, obviously, because it just came out in Modern Horizons 2. It's been pulling its weight. In the early game, this card is amazing. It'll easily draw you 3 cards before it's dealt with. It reads, it's a 1/1 for 1 human soldier. When an opponent casts their first non-creature spell each turn, draw a card unless that pair plays X, where X is its power. So it's kind of a mini Rhystic Study. The later the game goes on to, it's also good because it's just another taxing effect, and we have quite a few of those in this deck. So this is just another card draw piece on a cheap creature. Next creature up, Hex Parasite. It is a 1 generic 1/1 artifact creature insect. You may pay X and a Phyrexian black, so that can be a black mana or 2 life, to remove up to X counters from target permanent. For each counter removed this way, the Hex Parasite gets +1/+0 until end of turn. This is obviously just here, so you can remove the counters off the Divine Intervention right away. This is one of the newer additions to get rid of counters in my deck. This one will be the least relevant. This one I kind of just throw out there because it usually takes some hate off of Zur or one of my other enchantments that I want more because of how scary it is. And if it just does stay out there, then I can easily do 1 turn where I just tie the game. So, on to the next creature, Grand Abolisher. This is the newest addition in this deck. I'm not sure if I want to keep it, but he has pulled his weight. He's a 2/2 double white human cleric, and during your turn, your opponents can't cast spells or activate abilities of artifacts, creatures, or enchantments. So, basically, he says that your opponents can't do anything during your turn. They can use mana abilities, but outside of that, you're home free to do whatever you want. So no counter spells, no removal spells. If this is out, then you can just tie the game with no repercussions. So this creature is great for that. On to the next creature, Vampire Hexmage, double black for a 2/1 first strike Vampire Shaman, and it has Sacrifice Vampire Hexmage, remove all counters from target permanent. Obviously, none of that other mumbo jumbo means anything. You just play it to immediately sacrifice it and remove the counters off the Divine Intervention. Sweet little card here. This is probably the best counter removal card in this deck. So there's a few ways to get it, and I'll get through those once we get there. Next creature up is going to be Aven Mind Sensor. It is a 2 generic white 2/1 bird wizard with flash and flying, and if an opponent would search a library, that player searches the top 4 cards of that library instead. This is just here for library hate. There's a lot of library searching, especially the more competitive you go in Commander. And when I play this deck, I have people immediately team up on me. I am usually the arch enemy at the table, even if I'm not trying to win and I do all my politics shenanigans. Everyone will still go after me. So being able to shut down library searching with Aven Mind Sensor is crucially important, so that way they don't team up and tutor to stop me from tying the game. And Opposition Agent also does the same thing. It stops my opponents from searching, but also has the added benefit of not letting them search the top 4 not only, but letting me control them while I search the library, and exiling what they get and being able to cast it with any mana color. Also, when you control them, you get to look at their hand too, if you didn't know that already. So Opposition Agent is much better than Aven Mind Sensor, but they're both great for what I have them in here for, is the stop library search. The next creature up here will be Spellseeker. It is a 2 generic 1 blue human wizard, and it is a 1/1. When it enters the battlefield, search your library for an instant or sorcery card with converted mana cost 2 or less, reveal it, put it in your hand, and then shuffle your library. This card is great. It gets so many things in my deck, as we'll get to. It can get any counter spell, it can get Cyclonic Rift, it can get a better tutor, it can get Pull from Eternity, it can get Clock Spinning. Oh man, this card is amazing in this deck. And also with Cavern of Souls, making it uncounterable, it's just great. Notion Thief will be the next creature up. It is 2 generic and 1 blue and 1 black for a human rogue with flash, and it says, if an opponent would draw a card except for the first one he or she draws during each of her draw steps, instead that player skips that draw and you draw a card. So this is perfect for wheels or someone trying to use a mass draw spell like Return of the Wild Speaker or Rishkar's Expertise. This just shuts that down. You really don't know how often that matters, where someone will just try to draw a whole bunch of cards to stop you from your position to tie the game. This is perfect for shutting that down and making sure that no one can stop you. The next creature up is a little bit of a controversial one, Grand Arbiter Augustine IV. It is a 2 generic, 1 blue, 1 white Humid Advisor. It says white spells you cast cost 1 less, blue spells you cast cost 1 less, spells your opponents cast cost 1 more, and is a 2/3 body. So this card, a lot of people don't like. They don't like being taxed 1 more for each spell that they cast. So this creature will draw a lot of hate for you and for it itself. So if you don't want to play this, I understand. For this deck though, it's perfect for the cost reduction and also slowing your opponents down. Yeah, just overall puts in a lot of work. It's a good card. And then the next creature up is a Academy Rector. It is 3 generic and 1 white for a cleric. It also has been eroded. It is a human cleric, so that one is protected under Cavern of Souls as well. It is a 1/2, and whenever it is put into a graveyard from play, you may remove it from the game. If you do, search your library for an enchantment and put that card into play, then shuffle your library. So this obviously is one of the ways to just put Divine Intervention onto the battlefield really early into the game. If that's something you want to do. Most of the time, I usually don't end up getting it because if someone tries to pop my Academy Rector, they usually have a way to immediately get rid of the Divine Intervention and make it a lot harder. So I usually like to get something else to protect me, or to give me more card draw, or protect my other enchantments. You'll see once we get into the enchantments what this card gets. But yeah, Academy Rector, a staple card in every enchantment deck. So next we're on to the counter spells. Pack Negation, 0 mana counter spell, but you have to pay 5 during your next upkeep. If you don't, you lose the game. Usually when I play Pact Negation, it is when I'm trying to tie the game and I will not have another turn after that. It's either I tie the game or it's over. So the downside doesn't matter, it's a free counter spell. Swan Song, 1 blue, counter a target instant sorcery or enchantment, and its controller gets a 2/2 bird. The 2/2 bird does not matter at all. It's a 1 mana counter spell for counter wars, and also being 1 mana to counter 3 different things when it's not a counter war is really handy. And obviously we have normal counter spell, just solid counter spell. Can't go wrong with a normal counter spell. Dovin's Veto, it is 1 white, 1 blue for an instant, can't be countered, and it counters a non-creature spell. So it's a negate that can't be countered. This is perfect. This shuts down counter wars. This just tells everyone no. All these blue decks get told no by this card. Arcane Denial, 1 colorless and 1 blue for an instant. Counter target spell. Its controller may draw up to 2 cards at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep, and you draw a turn at the beginning of the next turn's upkeep. So a lot of people shy away from this card because it gives your opponent 2 cards, but I don't really care about that. They can have 2 cards, especially when Notion Thief's out. Go ahead, draw those 2 cards. I don't care. But this card replaces itself, so it's a 2 mana counter spell that counters anything and it replaces itself. That seems pretty good to me, so that's why I'm playing it. And then we have the best counter spell, Mana Drain. Double blue for an instant, counter target spell at the beginning of the next turn's main phase. Add an amount of colorless mana to your mana pool equal to that spell's converted mana cost. So yeah, this card is insane. It's ramp on a counter spell. You could easily tie the game a lot faster if you counter something huge and then cast Divine Intervention with the colorless mana you get. I've certainly done that before. It's pretty disgusting. Next counter spell up is Delay. It is 1 generic and 1 blue for an instant counter spell. If that spell is removed this way, remove it from the game instead with 3 time counters on it. Instead of putting it into its owner's graveyard, if it does not have suspend, it gains suspend. So that's a whole bunch of things to say that this counters a spell and then it goes away for 3 turns, and then it comes back onto the stack. So usually when I cast this, the game doesn't go on for much longer, the 3 turns. This actually ends up being a bonus that it gets removed from the game, because you can counter creatures that the opponent would rather have in the graveyard than in exile, or you can counter something like a counter spell. When it comes off of suspend, you don't care because it can't counter anything because nothing's on the stack. So this is a perfect counter spell. Just 2 mana, counter anything with almost no downside. Next up, Muddle the Mixture, double blue, counter an instant or sorcery, and it also has Transmute for 3. Transmute reads, discard this and search your library for a card with the same mana cost as this card and put it in your hand. You can only transmute as a sorcery, but this is great. This card pulls double duty. It counters instant sorceries, which are the main 2 things that I would want to counter, and it also transmutes for a 2-drop, so I can go get a better tutor if I want. I can go get Vampire Hex Mage. Those are the main 2 things that I want to get. I can also get Cyclonic Rift I want. This card's just great. It does everything I want it to. Next up is Fierce Guardianship. It is 2 generic and a blue. It's free if you have your commander out, and it negates. So counters a non-creature spell. No reason why I shouldn't be playing this. It's a free counter spell when Zur is out. It helps protect him or protect me when I'm trying to do the draw. Yep. And then next up, Force Negation. 1 generic and 2 blue for an instant. If it's not your turn, you may exile a blue card from your hand. Rather than pay its mana cost, you counter a non-creature spell. If that spell's countered this way, exile it instead of putting it into its owner's graveyard. So this card is just another free counter spell. That's why I'm playing it. Usually, when you're trying to do the draw, that kind of sucks about the not being your turn thing. But with the spell that it counters being exiled, that kind of matters sometimes. So just mostly playing it because it's a free counter spell. And then the last counter spell is obviously Force of Will. You may exile a blue card from your hand and pay 1 life instead of paying its mana cost, and you counter a spell. So yeah, just counter anything for a card and 1 life. 1 life is nothing. So on to the tutors. Mystical Tutor, 1 blue. Search your library for an instant or sorcery card. Reveal that card. Shuffle your library and put it on top. This goes and gets clock spinning. Another tutor. It can go get a counter spell. It can go get Psych Rift. It's probably the worst tutor in my deck, but it still pulls its weight and it does a good job of what it needs to do. Next up, Vampire Tutor, 1 black instant. Search your library for a card. Shuffle your library and put that card on top of it. You lose 2 life. This goes and gets any card for 1 mana, instant speed. That's insane. You should play this card if you're not already. Enlightened Tutor, 1 blue, or not 1 blue, 1 white. Search your library for an artifact or enchantment. Reveal that card and put it on top of your library and shuffle it. So this can go get Divine Intervention. It can go get Ramp in the early game. It can go get Esper Sentinel. It can go get any of our enchantments that we need. This card is terrific. On to our instants and sorceries. We have Swords of Plowshares, 1 white. Remove a creature from the game. Its controller gains life equal to its power. You don't care about the life they gain, obviously. It's just 1 mana, exile a creature. That's bonkers. And then we have Path to Exile. Exile a creature. Its controller gets a basic land, puts on the battlefield, taps, then shuffles. The land kind of matters, but it's a good trade-off for being able to exile a creature for 1 mana. And also, if there's an opposition agent or an Aven Mind Sensor from our deck out, or an opponent's, then this is just a freebie. So, great card. On to the next, we have Silence. 1 white, instant. Your opponents can't cast spells this turn. This card is perfect for what we want to do. We want to initiate the blue players to use their counter spells on this before we do anything like cast our Divine Intervention and get that countered. We don't want that to get countered, or cast anything else. We want to bait the blue players out, or this is great for also not only protecting yourself, but stopping other people from winning. I've stopped so many breach combos with this deck, or with this card, and it's perfect. It stops Thassa win too. It's great. Worm's Chant, same kind of thing as Silence, but you can only target a player, and if the kicker cost is played, the creatures that player controls can't attack either. So usually there's for the previous reasons that I mentioned, there's usually only 1 person that's going to be the problem. 1 specific blue player that has all the counter spells, or the person that's trying to win, obviously, that's the only person whose turn it is. So normally this does the same thing as Silence, but it's slightly worse. On to the next card. Clock Spinning. 1 blue for an instant with buyback 3. Choose a counter on target permanent or suspended card. Remove that counter from that permanent or card, and add another one. So we're obviously just going to be taking the counters off Divine Intervention. That's what this is for. The thing is that it has buyback, so that's perfect. It'll be 5 mana to get rid of both the counters right away, or you can sneakily remove one, and then go to your turn and remove the last one with the upkeep trigger. So yeah, this card is perfect. I can go and get it with all of my instant sorcery tutors. That's why it's in here. And then this is our backup plan. This is Pull from Eternity, 1 white for an instant. Remove target face-up card that's removed from the game into its owner's graveyard, or put target face-up card into its owner's graveyard from exile. So this is when I try to go for milling my Divine Intervention or discarding it and trying to use Replenish, or another way to put it on the battlefield and it gets exiled to my graveyard, or someone just exiles it while it's out before I can remove the counters. This is how I can get it back from exile. It's happened a few times where I have needed to get it back from exile, so this is perfect for that. This is actually the only card that exists that can do that in white, or in these colors. There's Rift Sweeper obviously in green, but I'm not playing green. So next up, Demonic Tutor, 1 and a black for sorcery. Search for any card, put in your hand, shuffle your library. Obviously, we're going to be playing this. This is perfect for our deck. This is Teferi's Protection, 2 generic and a white for a instant. Forgive me because this is in Japanese. I don't remember everything that this does, but I'm pretty sure it's your life total can't change, you have protection from everything, and all your permanents phase out. So it's just like, you can't touch me, I'm going to have another turn. Your hand and library can be messed with, but nothing else. So this is typically great for casting Divine Intervention and Teferi's Protectioning when someone tries to remove it or remove you from the game. So that way you can come back on your upkeep remove a counter with all your permanents untapped and everything to be able to defend it and remove the last counter. This is great in this deck. And then obviously Anguish Unmaking, Orzhov, 1 instant, remove or exile target non-land permanent, you lose 3 life. This just gets rid of anything for the meager cost of 3 mana and 3 life. The only removal that you want to be playing is permanent removal in Commander, because you only have so many slots in your deck, and being able to get rid of anything with 1 card is terrific. So the next card up is going to be Savine's Reclamation. It's going to be 2 generic and a white for a sorcery, and you return a permanent card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. If this spell was cast from a graveyard, you may copy that spell and choose new targets for the copy. And it also has flashback for 5 mana. So the goal of this card is to Sun Titan, usually an enchantment, because they're all 3 or less, from my graveyard to the battlefield. This could also hit Hex Parasite or any of our other creatures except for Notion Thief, I believe, and Academy Rector. The only 2 that cannot be gotten back with Savine's Reclamation. But yeah, this is terrific for what it does. It gets something back. It gets something back from my graveyard. Next up is Replenish. It's going to be 3 generic and 1 white for a sorcery. Return all enchantment cards from your graveyard to play. This is just really good for when you get blown out and all the enchantments get destroyed, to bring them all back, or to do a sneaky play where you discard Divine Intervention and then bring it back immediately with the Replenish for 4 mana instead of paying the full 8. So that's what this card's for. It's terrific in every Enchantress deck, and you should play it if you're able to afford it. Next up, we have Ad Nauseam. It's 3 and double black for an instant. Reveal the top card of your library. You may put that card in your hand. You lose life equals to its converted mana cost. You may repeat the process any number of times. So this card is good for just if you're out of options as far as your card draw and you have the healthy life total, or you have a way to protect yourself, as we'll get into my enchantments. This is good for just going for a draw, where you go for a bunch of cards. If you've seen through my deck, nothing has been over 4 mana except for the Divine Intervention. Still, the curve could stand to be a little bit lower if you want to play this card. It's not supposed to get me a whole bunch of value. It's mainly supposed to draw 8 to 10 cards, which it usually does. So it's good for what I want it to do. Next up is Cyclonic Rift. Everyone plays this card if you're playing blue. One a blue instant, return an online permanent you don't control to your owner's hand, and it has overload for 7 mana. This just blows people out. You return everything to their owner's hands, and it doesn't affect you. Yeah, we'll be playing this one sideboard wipe. Next up is Supreme Verdict. It is 1 white, blue for a sorcery. It can't be countered, destroy all creatures. This is terrific for just getting rid of all the creatures that can't be countered, and it is also good for destroying our Academy Rector, so that way we can sacrifice, or that we can exile it from our graveyard and go and get any enchantment and put on the battlefield. Blah. So, yep, just solid board wipe. Alright, on to our enchantments now. Mystic Remora, 1 blue, cumulative upkeep 1, so on each of our upkeeps we have to pay 1 and then 2 and then 3. And whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, you may draw a card if they don't pay 4 mana. They're never going to pay the 4 almost ever, so this is great in the early game when everyone wants to be playing artifacts and trying to get ahead in the game. This is perfect. This will draw you a lot of cards. Next up is Greater Oromancy. It's going to be 1 generic and a white for an enchantment. Other creatures you control have Shroud. Enchanted creatures you control have Shroud. So we're just playing it for the first line of text. We don't have any enchantments that go on Zur. So this is to protect our other enchantments from getting removed. You can, as you'll see, do something really cool when I get to it with this card. But yeah, it's mostly just so to protect against targeted removal. Next up is Rhystic Study. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, you may draw a card unless that player pays 1. Rhystic Study is just EDH staple. If you're not playing it, this will make your deck better if you're playing blue. Next up is Necropotence. It's going to be triple black enchantment. Skip your draw step. Whenever you discard a card, exile that card from your graveyard, and you may pay 1 life, exile the top card of your library face down, put that card into your hand, beginning next end step. This is terrific for when people are shutting down your Rhystic Studies and Mystic Remoras, and you're too low on life for Adnaz. You can just draw a new hand with this and gas up and keep going. And the triple black doesn't usually matter because I have Zur and Urborg for that. So this will be the first card to come out of my deck when I find something to replace it with, but this is Propaganda. Whenever a creature attacks you, they can't unless their controller pays 2 additional generic mana per creature. So this will just stop you from getting attacked as much. Yeah, it's not really that great, but it's a good median piece, so you don't have to get what I'm gonna show you next here. Solitary Confinement. 2 generic and a white for an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice Solitary Confinement unless you discard a card. Skip your draw step. You have Shroud. Prevent all damage should be dealt to you. So this is our crown jewel enchantment for keeping us alive. The first 2 lines of text are pretty detrimental to you, so you want to have a card draw engine set up to be able to keep this around. So that's why the Propaganda is still here. Sometimes I am not able to keep this around, so I don't want to bring it out, and I'd rather bring the Propaganda out. But the last 2 lines of text matter immensely. You can't be targeted for discards or direct damage or anything, or mill also. Targeted mill does not work on you. So the You Have Shroud thing actually kind of matters more than you'd think. And prevent all damage is obviously what we're playing this for. You still lose life, so be careful with necropotence and ad nauseum, and other people's drain effects like aristocrats that make you lose life. Be careful of those. But other than that, this should give you the most of the time that you need to draw the game. Next up, we have Aura of Silence. This is going to be a 1 generic double white enchantment. Artifacts and enchantments. Your opponent's play costs 2 more. And then you can sacrifice it to destroy an artifact or enchantment. This is not in here for the first line of text, although it is very good at stopping your opponents from just pooping out artifacts. It is for the second line of text for when I have a Greater Auramancy out and I'm trying to take the counters off Divine Intervention. Because it gives my enchantment Shroud, I have to get rid of it to be able to remove the counters and target the Divine Intervention, so that's what this is for. It is a way that I can tutor it out with Zur to instantly get rid of the enchantment to be able to take the counters off Divine Intervention. Next up is Imprison in the Moon, double generic, and a blue for an enchantment aura. Enchant creature, land, or planeswalker. Enchanted permanent is a colorless land with tap, added colorless mana to your mana pool, loses all other card types and abilities. This is just for commanders mostly. This is actually terrific with Zur too, because if they do not respond to the attack trigger on Zur, then you can get this and enchant their commander before they can respond to it at all. So this is just for shutting down problematic commanders mostly. Next up is Grasp of Fate, 1 generic double white enchantment. Enters the battlefield, for each opponent exile up to 1 target non-land permanent that player controls until it leaves the battlefield. This is just a 3-for-1 that you can get out with Zur. Usually each person has at least 1 problematic thing that you can hit. So usually you can keep this around with the Shroud or your counterspell protection. So usually the things that you get with this will stay gone forever. Next up, Detention Sphere. 1 generic, 1 white, 1 blue for an enchantment. It exiles a non-land permanent when it enters until it leaves, and all of their permanents with the same name. So this is great for if one person has a problematic thing, you don't want to get the Grasp of Fate and exile other people's stuff, then you can get this. Or also, if people have multiples, like everyone plays Soul Rings, so if there's 2 Soul Rings out, then that would be perfect for this, to remove both Soul Rings. So this gets a 2-for-1. And it does get rid of your stuff too, so if you have a Soul Ring and 2 of your opponents have a Soul Ring, it'll get rid of your Soul Ring as well, so be careful of that. Next up, we have the copy enchantments. So first one is Mirror Maid. Enters a copy of any artifact or enchantment on the battlefield. Mostly you're going to be copying your enchantments, so you can copy Rhystic Study, Mystic Remora, one of the permanent removal cards. You can copy the Shroud, so that way you have Shroud on the Shroud, so that way they can't target any of your enchantments, not just the one that's giving the Shroud. This card is one of the first cards I get after I get the card draw. Having 2 Rhystic Studies is bonkers. Or you could have 3 Rhystic Studies with copy enchantment. Enters a copy of any enchantment in play. Just for these 3. This one's a little bit special because this one copies an enchantment only you control, but during your upkeep you can change the copy of this to any enchantment you control. So this is the one I'll usually get to copy the Shrouds, that way it can change the copy to something else and then destroy the original copy and remove the counters for Divine Intervention. So with that being said, this is the last card here, Smothering Tithe. 3 generic, 1 white for an enchantment. Whenever an opponent draws a card, they don't pay 2, that player, you create a treasure token and you can sacrifice a burning card. People like to draw cards in Commander. This card is bonkers. It's the only 4 mana, the only enchantment that's 4 mana, and we're not playing any other enchantments. that are 3 or 4 or more. So that just shows how good this card is if it's the only 4-mana enchantment we have. So that being said, that's the entire deck. That is my Zur the Enchanter deck that is all based around tying the game with Divine Intervention. If you have any suggestions, any feedback that you'd like to leave, please leave a comment in the comment box down below. Like the video if you liked it, and I'll see you guys in my next video.